Military Branch 275. This ceremony today is in memory of all military and civilian personnel who served on the island of Oahu on 7 December 1941. It's being presented by Fleet Reserve Association Branch 275, assisted by VFW Post 2680, VFW Post 10165, Marine Corps League Detachment 697. Color Guard, Post Colors. Say with me the Pledge of Allegiance to flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chaplain, you come up, open the Bible, and give the invocation.
Almighty God, the creator of all things, we humbly beseech thee to accept our devotions, have mercy on the souls of our departed shipmates, guide us in all our undertakings, that we may truly please thee. Amen.
Amen.
You may be seated. I would like to thank all of you on behalf of all the veterans of El Dorado County for being here today in tribute to gallant Americans who served and died during the unprovoked attack on Pearl Harbor 70 years ago. One of my duties when I was national president of the Fleet Reserve Association, I attended the ceremony in Hawaii. It was a very moving ceremony. If no one has been there, you have a chance to go to it. I had the honor of placing a wreath on the Arizona Memorial. After it was over with, the ceremony was over with, the National Park Rangers took dignitaries out on a boat trip around the island explaining everything that happened along the way, which very many people don't get to go on. It was something else. For those who don't know, the FRA is a professional military organization comprised of the current and former enlisted members of the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. It continues to remember Pearl Harbor. Our members have played an important role in preserving the memory of those who perished 7 years ago. The FRA branches around the nation are conducting and participating in events like this one to honor the sacrifice of those service members and their families, and also honor those who continue the tradition and service today. I understand we have 4 Pearl Harbor survivors here in El Dorado County. Bill Howell in the U.S. Navy, he's in Pearl Harbor today, attending the ceremonies. Fred Morley, Coast Guard, I understand he's in the hospital, Marshall Hospital. And then Vernon Castle, I have no information on him. The 4th one, I don't know who it is. We'll now have our guest speaker, Dusty Derrick, the Colonel, U.S. Army retired. He'll come up and he'll give us a short talk.
morning, everyone. I am delighted to be here today to speak to so many people. I wasn't expecting quite this many. As the country woke up this morning, I would imagine less than 5% of Americans even thought about what happened to this country 70 years ago today. We are losing World War II veterans every day at the rate of 2,300. And the greatest generation is passing on. The Japanese, on December the 7th, with all the planning by the Japanese admiral, made one fatal error at Pearl Harbor. They never attacked the fuel reserves that existed on Oahu and the other islands of the Hawaiian chain. And it is that fuel that eventually led to their demise. Because though they thought they had destroyed everything, they hadn't destroyed the fundamental logistic means that the air war in the Pacific brought to them eventually. A few ground guys participated too, Marines and Army and Navy. But it was that fuel, for the military historians here, that really changed the course of the war on that very first day. I don't intend today to talk to you about what happened at Pearl Harbor. You just saw what happened. What I'd like to do is talk to you about some people who were there. How many in the room have heard of Dory Miller? 2 or 3. Well, Dory Miller was a hero. One of the first heroes of Pearl Harbor. Dory was the ship's heavyweight boxing champion on the USS West Virginia, which was at Pearl Harbor that day. He was awarded the Navy Cross by Admiral Chester Nimitz. Some of you may have heard of him. On board the USS Enterprise, CP-6 at Pearl Harbor on the 27th of May, 1942. And I'd like to tell you the story of Dory Miller. His actual name is Doris. You know, a guy named Doris, he's going to have a problem his whole life. So he adopted the nickname of Dory. And that's what he was to his shipmates and his friends. Dory was born in Waco, Texas on the 12th of October, 1919, to Henrietta and Connery Miller. He had 3 brothers, one of whom served in the Army during World War II. He attended Moore High School in Waco, Texas, and was a fullback on the football team, and he worked on his father's farm. Dory was enlisted in the Navy in 1939 as a mess attendant, 3rd class in Dallas, Texas, so he could travel and earn money for his family. He later was commended by the Secretary of the Navy, was advanced to mess attendant 2nd class and then 1st class. So this guy was a distinguished combat sailor. He worked in the mess hall on several Navy ships. Following his training at the Navy training station in Norfolk, Virginia, Miller was assigned to the ammunition ship, the USS Pyro, where he served as a mess attendant. That ship was not in Pearl Harbor. In 1940, he was transferred to the West Virginia, where he became the ship's heavyweight boxing champion. So he must have been a hell of a fighter, because there were a lot of good fighters on that ship, the way I understand it. He was on that ship, the West Virginia, on the day the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor 70 years ago today. Dory had gotten up at 6 in the morning, was collecting laundry when the alarm for the general quarters sounded, according to the history that I have. He headed for his battle station, the anti-aircraft battery magazine amidship, only to discover that the torpedo damage had wrecked it, so he went up on deck. Because of his physical prowess, he was assigned to carry wounded fellow sailors to places of greater safety during the attack. Then an officer ordered him to the bridge to aid a mortally wounded captain of his ship. He subsequently manned a 50 caliber Browning anti-aircraft machine gun. How many of you in the room know what that is? It's a devastating weapon on a Navy ship. Miller described firing the machine gun during the battle, a weapon he had never been trained to operate. It wasn't hard, he said. I just pulled the trigger and she worked fine. I watched the others with these guns, and I guess I fired her for about 15 minutes. I think I got one of those Jap planes, he said. They were diving pretty close to us. I guess he was a little bit of an understated boxing champ. During the attack, the Japanese aircraft dropped 2 armor-piercing bombs through the deck of the battleship and launched 5 18-inch aircraft torpedoes into her port side. Heavily damaged by the ensuing explosion and suffering from severe flooding below decks, the crew abandoned ship while West Virginia slowly settled to the harbor bottom. Of the 1,541 men on the West Virginia during that attack, 130 were killed and 52 wounded. Subsequently, the West Virginia was refloated, repaired, and modernized, and the battleship served in the Pacific Theater through the end of the war in August 1945. Dory was commended by the Secretary of the Navy on 1 April 1942, and on 27 May he received the Navy Cross, which Fleet Admiral, then Admiral Chester Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief, Pacific Fleet, personally presented to Miller on board the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise. For his extraordinary courage in battle, Dory was the first black man in the Pacific War to receive the Navy Cross, a real hero. I have another small story by a fellow named Davis, also a sailor. And I chose sailors today because I'm speaking at a fleet reserve. I'm not a Navy guy, but I'd like you all to know my son is a retired Navy commander. And the guy I'm going to talk about next here this morning is a Pearl Harbor survivor. That's what he looks like today. Skinny little guy. One of the last. This fellow is 88 years today. But at that time, he was one of the youngest sailors on the scene of the bombing raid that drew the United States into World War II. Very understated guy, also a hero. Said, I was extremely lucky, Davis says, noting that he was just 17 when he arrived in Pearl Harbor in April 1941. Having just completed training as a radio operator, Davis was assigned temporary duty as, guess what, a mess cook aboard the USS repair ship anchored in Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7th. And about 10 other mess cooks besides Davis were preparing for their morning duties when the Japanese made their first strike. As I study history, which I enjoy doing, I find it most interesting to go directly to the people that were there and listen to what they had to say about what happened. You get a particularly interesting flavor when you do that. And this fellow Davis tells it. We were just standing there talking, looking out of one of the portholes when we saw this huge flame and this airplane just went to pieces. And we said, goodness gracious, one of the tankers must have blown up. We didn't realize it was a strike at that time. And about that time they sounded general quarters, so we just went from there. And I can imagine that some of those 1,177 guys that died on the Arizona had this similar kind of reaction when they started hearing all the ruckus going on above them. At the time that Davis was making this remark, goodness gracious, he never realized that these were his last moments as a mess cook. They sent him up to the boat deck, and as chief boatswain's mate started assigning us duties, he said. He told us to go down and start bringing up ammunition, and so that's what we did. And that's how this whole thing started. I remember it well, Davis said. Many things happened in those few hours, and with it being so long ago, our organization, and Davis happens to belong to the Fleet Reserve, and that's how our organization is and is having a hard time today. As chairman of the American chapter of the National Coral Harbor Survivors Association, Davis is in effect the last man standing in St. Mary's County, with only 3 left in Charles County. We used to have over 200, he said, and only about 12 remain in the whole state of Maryland today. Every time I stop to think of a different name, I remember, oh, he's passed away now. There aren't a lot of us left, and it's hard to keep track. This year we commemorate the 70th anniversary, along with Davis and the other survivors, the sons and daughters of the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. And we will gather, and we are gathering here today, as are hundreds of others across this great country. Davis thinks that they're it. The sons and daughters will have to keep the Pearl Harbor Association going. I don't know how many there are here. I know that Ann Dixon is here, and her husband's a Pearl Harbor survivor. She's a member of that organization. How many others of the Pearl Harbor survivors are here to say today? Nobody. That's a sad thing. So it's the sons and daughters of the Pearl Harbor survivors that are going to keep this memory alive. A memory that we, all of us as Americans, should never forget. The attack on Pearl Harbor is a devastating, world-changing event. And today, as America woke up, I would imagine less than 5% of people even know that today is Pearl Harbor Day. But the place has real meaning to me, real meaning obviously to all of you who are here, and we pay homage to those heroes, 2,403 of them, including 65 civilians who died on December the 7th, 1941. And I don't know how many of the wounded that day, of which there are a couple of thousand, also died of their wounds. This whole thing is, to me, kind of unbelievable in some aspects. We know how it happened, but it's hard to imagine why. We don't fully understand why the Japanese attacked the United States of America on December the 7th. But we know the aftermath of that attack, and we ought to remember it. That war is really the last war that America has won, and we've fought many since then. Last year, I went to visit my family in Honolulu, and I made my 5th trip to the USS Arizona. I hope you get a flavor this morning, putting yourselves in the shoes of a couple of sailors, one of them a hero, the other one an unwilling cook and fighter, Pearl Harbor Day. It saddens me to think that so many who gave so much so that we can today be free, that we can today celebrate this great nation's victory in World War II. We need to remember it. As I read history, I know that we knew that an attack was coming on Pearl Harbor. There were 5 or 6 code-breaking machines distributed, but none were sent to the admiral that was in charge at Pearl Harbor. had he known that he had one of these code-breaking machines and was reading the messages that were flying back and forth in the War Department, flying back and forth in Europe, and flying back and forth to the one in Japan, where our attaché had one, we might have been able to prevent Pearl Harbor, but we didn't. It was an intelligence failure on December the 7th, a colossal one, in my opinion, that should never be repeated. But we seem to be repeating it again. You all know the history recently of an attack which happened on November the 11th. We knew about it as well. We didn't know how it was going to happen, but we knew about it. And yet, our intelligence community in our military forces has almost been dismantled, as it was in 1941. I can myself understand that. In this room sit a bunch of veterans, including me. We have today thousands of soldiers fighting for us again, against a pernicious enemy that we know about, and we're kind of tying their hands behind their backs. We all ought of us to be doing something about that. We can trace our failure to do things like we need to right back to the failure at Pearl Harbor, where we knew the enemy was going to attack and did nothing. Ladies and gentlemen, our country today is in greater peril than it was on December the 7th, 1941. And we need to start waking up to it. I won't talk about the adversaries we're facing. You've all read about them in the newspaper, at least a little bit. But it is far worse than you can imagine. I still have some friends, some of them generals, today's Army, that I talk to periodically, and they express to me the same thought that I just put to you, that we are in greater danger today than we were on December the 7th, 1941. And I want to leave you with that thought. What you do about it is up to you.
Come back, Laura.
My name is Jack Wharf. I'm the Commandant for Hangtown Detachment 697. I've been honored by the Fleet Reserve Association, which I am also a member of, and their request to read an article that was written by a survivor from December 7th. It was a beautiful Sunday morning in Hawaii, December 7th of 1941. It's a sky filled with Japanese military aircraft bent on delivery with surprise and striking blow to the United States of America at Pearl Harbor. Two waves of aircraft totaling 353 in all were launched from 6 aircraft carriers in the seas northwest of Hawaii. This peaceful morning would become an event that would change the entire world, a day that will always live in infamy. Just as the words of FDR rang out in his historic speech the following day, Sneak attack of grandest scale to come and kill at that hour. It is very easy to find facts and stories that this event in our history. You can search at Pearl Harbor, the attack on Pearl Harbor, or December 7, 1941, and find everything you could ever want to know on the subject. I wrote this poem for the men and women who lived through this attack, and even more so for those that did not. I also wrote this poem for the people like my grandfather, who were moved to action as a result of the surprise attack. Men and women who immediately stood up for freedom, independence, and our way of life by serving in our military to protect our freedom and defend our country and the rest of the world from tyranny. This poem is for them and for all of you. Warm blue water quietly swells, Sunday morning blooms are sweet, listening for distant bells of churches in the Pacific heat. Quiet breezes blow off the water as fishermen's boat flag unfurls. Waimomi, the Hawaiians call her, the harbor with water of pearls. So many lives were taken here. By surprise they came to kill. Young men attacking without fear. Water and sky no longer still. An empire chose to start a war by attacking us while unaware. A hole in the blue sky they tore. Bullets and bombs everywhere. An exercise of might and power, sneak attack of grandest scale to come and kill at that hour. Sunday bullets rain like hail. The ending blow would be ours. Atomic hammer strike would solve ending this clash of powers. Bombers flying in silent resolve, flying into the rising sun. A fat boy and a little boy, as we all know them. Soon this war shall be won. So many lives it did destroy. Again the water of pearls is calm, a memorial now in place of rest. No bullet now or falling bomb, just the sun setting in the west. To those veterans of this era, whether you are gone from this earth, on to glory, or still here with us, God bless you. Thank you for your service to our country. Every day that goes by in America is a better day because of you. We will never forget the attack on Pearl Harbor, the events of December 7th, 1941, or the bravery of our military forces and the steely resolve of their families. A day that will live in infamy forever. Thank you.
We'll now have our two-bell ceremony, but prior to that, I want to read the preface to it. The Fleet Reserve Association's two-bell ceremony is a dramatic testimony to humility, dignity, reverence, and honor. It fulfills the promise of our preamble, our reverence for the memory of our departed shipmates. Unfortunately, there is no written documentation or knowledge that clearly identifies the origin of this beloved ritual, except that it is unique and ours alone. In researching naval history back to the time of Britain's Lord Nelson, we can find no record of a memorial ceremony using a ship's bell. Our current elder statesman credits several deceased shipmates as being largely responsible for originating and refinement of the ritual. But it is clear the sounding of two bells is the time or the moment to pause and reflect on our shipmates who are now serving on the staff of the Supreme Commander. In days past, two bells marked the end of a routine day aboard ship. It was time for tattoo, and soon taps would sound throughout the ship. Certainly this is the most appropriate time to honor our departed shipmates. Those familiar with one of the greatest stories of the sea, the Ancient Mariner, will remember that he found safe passage in the narrow waters by listening to the bells on the marking buoys. That bobbing marking buoy sounds much like the tolling of the ship's bell for the funeral dredge, solemn, reverent, and mournful. Since the beginning of record time, men of the sea have been guided and impressed by the sounding of the ship's bell. In our two-bell ceremony, the tolling of the bell and the spoken words can and should be combined to execute a ritual and and contributes to strengthen the bond that exists among all shipmates of the Fleet Reserve Association. All rise, please.
The toll of the ship's bell reminds us of the reverence we owe to our departed shipmates and to those who guard the honor of our country. Upon the sea, under the sea. In the air and upon foreign soil. Let it be a reminder of the faith they confide in us. Let us gather here, not forget our obligation. And in silence, breathe a prayer to our absent shipmates. Each in his own words, and each in his own way, bow your heads and let us pray. Offering a silent prayer for our departed shipmates. Who are now serving on the staff of the Supreme Commander. This moment of reverence we dedicate to the memory of the shipmates, the personnel who are the remnants of the December 7th Pearl Harbor Day that passed away this year.
You may be seated. Okay, now you can be seated. Flagpole in detail, take your positions. National Guard, retired colors. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out today.